Captain Jake Morrison stared at the screen in front of him. The words kept coming, one after another, each one worse than the last. New Tokyo had fallen. The Mars defense grid was offline. The Centauri colonies had surrendered without a fight. Every human world in the galaxy was giving up. The bridge of the UHS Defiance was quiet. Too quiet. The crew watched their captain read the messages, and they all knew what it meant. Humanity was finished. "Sir," Communications Officer Lisa Grant said softly. "There's another message coming in." Morrison looked at her. Lisa was young, maybe 25, with brown hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had joined the crew 2 years ago, fresh from the academy. She was good at her job, but right now she looked scared. "Put it through," Morrison said. The voice that came through the speakers was calm and official. It was Admiral Parker from Earth Command. "This is Admiral Parker speaking to all remaining human vessels. By order of the United Earth Government, all military ships are to stand down immediately. We have agreed to terms with the Zephyrian Empire. The war is over. Report to the nearest Zephyrian fleet for processing." Morrison felt something cold settle in his stomach. Earth had surrendered. His homeworld, the center of human civilization, had given up without even trying to fight. "Captain," Chief Engineer Ron Palmer said from his station. Ron was older, maybe 50, with gray hair and hands that always had grease on them. He had been working on ships since he was 16. "What are your orders?" Morrison looked around. The bridge. There were 8 people here and 35 more throughout the ship. 43 souls total. All of them were looking at him, waiting for him to tell them what to do. The Defiance was not a big ship. It was a frigate, built for speed and hitting hard, not for long battles. It had been designed to patrol the outer rim, to chase pirates and protect mining operations. It was not built to fight an empire, but it was all they had left. "Lisa," Morrison said. "Are there any other human ships still operating?" Lisa checked her console. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls. "I'm scanning all frequencies, sir. I'm not picking up any active human military signals. It looks like we're the only ones left." Navigator Sam Rodriguez turned in his chair. Sam was Morrison's age, maybe 35, and they had grown up together on the rim colonies. "Jake," he said quietly, using Morrison's first name like he always did when they were alone. "What do we do now?" Morrison walked to the front of the bridge. Through the main screen he could see the asteroid field they were hiding in. The rocks floated slowly past, some as big as buildings, others no bigger than cars. It was a good place to hide, but it would not protect them forever. "Tell me about the Zephyrians," Morrison said to his crew. "What do we know about them?" "Tactical." Officer Greg Hayes spoke up. Greg was quiet most of the time, but he knew more about alien military tactics than anyone else on the ship. "They showed up about 2 years ago, sir. Started at the edge of the galaxy and worked their way in. Every species they meet either surrenders or gets destroyed. No one has ever beaten them in a fight." "How do they do it?" Morrison asked. "Fear," Dr. Amy Foster said from her station. Amy was the ship's doctor, but she also studied alien psychology. "They show up with huge fleets, hundreds of ships, all bigger than anything we've ever built. When people see them coming, they know they can't win, so they give up." "But they must have weaknesses," Morrison said. "Everything has weaknesses." "Maybe," Greg said, "but no one has ever lived long enough to find out what they are." Morrison nodded slowly. He walked back to his captain's chair and sat down. The chair was worn and comfortable. He had been sitting in it for 3 years, ever since he had been given command of the Defiance. In that time they had chased smugglers, rescued stranded miners, and fought off pirate attacks. It had been good work, honest work. Now it might all be over. "Sir," Lisa said, "I'm detecting ships approaching our position. Long-range sensors show 12 vessels, all Zephyrian design." Morrison felt his heart start to beat faster. "How long? Until they reach us?" "About 2 hours at their current speed. 2 hours. That was not much time to decide the fate of the human race." Morrison thought about his childhood on the rim colonies. Life had been hard out there. The weather was bad, the soil was poor, and the nearest help was weeks away. But the people who lived there had learned one important thing. You never gave up. When the storms came, you waited them out. When the crops failed, you planted again. When the pirates attacked, you fought back. His father had told him once, "Jake, there are two kinds of people in the universe. Those who break when things get hard, and those who get harder when things try to break them. You decide which one you want to be." Morrison had made his decision a long time ago. He activated the shipwide communication system. All over the Defiance, crew members stopped what they were doing to listen to their captain. "This is Captain Morrison speaking," he said. "By now, you've all heard the news. Earth has surrendered. Every human world has given up without a fight. The government says the war is over." He paused, looking around at his bridge crew. They were all watching him, waiting. "But I disagree," Morrison continued. "The war isn't over until every human who wants to fight has had their chance. We are the last free human ship in the galaxy. We can surrender or we can fight. The choice is ours." He stood up from his chair. "I know what the smart thing to do is. We're outnumbered, we're outgunned. Logic says we should give up and hope for mercy. But logic has never been the human way." Through the communication system, he could hear movement throughout the ship. People were getting ready. "We are the UHS Defiance," Morrison said, his voice getting stronger. "We don't surrender, we don't break, and today we make our stand." He turned off the communication system and looked at his crew. "Anyone who wants to leave can take a shuttle and try to reach the Zephyrian fleet. I won't think less of you." Nobody moved. "Good," Morrison said. "Then let's get to work." The next 2 hours passed quickly. Ron Palmer worked in the engine room, pushing the ship's reactor to maximum power. Greg Hayes checked and rechecked the weapon systems. Sam Rodriguez plotted courses through the asteroid field, looking for the best places to hide and fight. Dr. Foster prepared the medical bay for casualties. She knew there would be wounded, and she wanted to be ready. Lieutenant Ben Clark, the ship's youngest officer, monitored enemy communications, trying to learn anything he could about their opponents. Katie Burns, the weapons specialist, ran diagnostic tests on every missile and energy weapon they had. The Defiance was not heavily armed, but what they had worked well. "Captain," Sam said as the enemy fleet got closer, "I found a good position. There's a cluster of large asteroids about 10 kilometers from here. Lots of cover, multiple escape routes. Take us there," Morrison ordered. The Defiance moved slowly through the asteroid field. The ship's engines were running quiet, trying not to attract attention. Through the main screen, Morrison could see the enemy ships getting closer. They were huge, each one easily 10 times the size of his frigate. But size was not everything. The Defiance was fast and maneuverable. It could go places the big ships could not follow. "Positions, everyone," Morrison said as they reached the asteroid cluster. "This is it." The bridge crew settled into their stations. The ship went to full combat alert. Red lights flashed and warning sounds echoed through the corridors. On the main screen, the Zephyrian fleet appeared. 12 massive ships moving in perfect formation. They looked like metal mountains floating through space. Morrison felt the familiar calm that came before a fight. He had been in combat before, but never anything like this. This was not just about winning or losing. This was about proving that humanity would not go quietly into the dark. "All stations report ready, sir," Greg said. "Enemy fleet is entering. Weapons range," Katie added. Morrison nodded. "Then let's show them what humans are made of." Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crushing Blade. Through the massive viewing screen, he could see the asteroid field where the small human ship was hiding. He had conquered 47 star systems in the past 2 years. Not once had he lost a single ship. This would be no different. "Commander," he said to his second in command, "what do we know about this human vessel?" "It is called the Defiance, Admiral. A small frigate, crew of approximately 40. Standard human weapons and shields. They should pose no threat to our forces." Kethvar nodded. The humans had been disappointing. When his empire first encountered them, there had been hope for an Interesting war. Humans had a reputation for being fighters, but like all the other species, they had collapsed at the first sight of Zephyrian power, all except this one small ship. They refused our surrender demand? Kethvar asked. Yes, Admiral. Their captain sent a message saying they would not give up. Kethvar felt a small spark of interest. It had been so long since anyone had shown even a hint of courage. What was the exact message? His commander checked his notes. The human captain said, "Come and take us if you can." For the first time in months, Kethvar smiled. Interesting. Very well. Let us see what these humans are truly made of. All ships, advance into the asteroid field. Find them and destroy them. The 12 Zephyrian ships moved forward like a school of metal sharks. Each one was over 800 meters long, bristling with weapons and protected by energy shields that could stop anything the humans had ever built. On the Defiance, Captain Morrison watched the enemy fleet approach. The asteroids around them provided some cover, but he knew it would not be enough. The Zephyrian ships had sensors that could see through rock and metal. Enemy fleet is spreading out, Greg Hayes reported from his tactical station. They're trying to surround us. Sam, Morrison said to his navigator, remember what we used to do when we were kids? Racing through the canyon runs on Kepler 7? Sam Rodriguez grinned. You mean the crazy flying that nearly got us killed a dozen times? That's exactly what I mean. Think you can do it again? With this ship? Jake, I can make her dance. Morrison turned to his weapons officer. Katie, what's our ammunition status? Katie. Burns checked her displays. We have 12 plasma torpedoes courtesy of Ron's modifications. Standard energy weapons are fully charged. Not much against 12 capital ships, but it's what we have. It will have to be enough, Morrison said. Everyone hold on. This is going to get rough. The first Zephyrian ship to enter the asteroid field was the Bone Crusher, a heavy cruiser with enough firepower to level a city. Its captain, Commander Vexnall, was confident this would be over quickly. Target acquired, his weapons officer reported. The human ship is hiding behind a large asteroid cluster at coordinates 77 Mark IV. Destroy them, Vexnall ordered. The Bone Crusher's main guns opened fire. Massive beams of energy lanced out, striking the asteroids where the Defiance had been hiding. Rock and metal exploded in brilliant flashes, lighting up the darkness of space. But when the light faded, the human ship was gone. Where did they go? Vexnall demanded. Unknown, sir. They seem to have moved before we fired. On the Defiance, Sam. Rodriguez was flying the ship like it was part of his own body. The frigate twisted and turned through the asteroid field, using the floating rocks as cover. Behind them, the massive Zephyrian beams carved through space, destroying everything they touched except their target. They're too slow, Sam said, sweat beading on his forehead as he piloted the ship through a gap barely wider than their hull. These big ships can't maneuver in here like we can. Morrison nodded. Katie, can you get a shot at that cruiser? Katie studied her targeting display. If Sam can get us to the other side of that big asteroid, I might have an angle. Do it, Morrison ordered. The Defiance spun around a massive chunk of rock, its engines pushing it to maximum speed. For a moment, they were completely exposed to the enemy fleet. 5 different Zephyrian ships opened fire at once, but Sam was ready. The frigate dropped suddenly, diving below the energy beams. The shots passed overhead, close enough that the heat made the hull groan. Now, Morrison shouted. Katie fired 2 plasma torpedoes. The modified weapons, enhanced by Ron Palmer's engineering genius, streaked across space faster than anything the Zephyrians had seen before. They struck the Bone Crusher's shields and, to everyone's surprise, punched right through. The explosions tore into the cruiser's hull. Atmosphere vented into space in white clouds. The massive ship shuddered and began to list to one side. On the crushing blade, Admiral Kethvar stared at his tactical display in shock. How is this possible? That human ship just damaged the Bone Crusher. Sir, their weapons appear to be modified beyond standard specifications. Our intelligence was incomplete. Kethvar felt something he had not experienced in years. Uncertainty. All ships concentrate fire on that frigate. I want it destroyed immediately. The Defiance was already moving again. Sam had plotted a course that took them through the densest part of the asteroid field, where the big Zephyrian ships would have trouble following. "Ron," Morrison called down to engineering, "how are those modifications holding up?" Ron Palmer's voice came back through the communication system. "The plasma torpedoes are working better than I hoped, Captain, but we're pushing the reactor pretty hard. I can give you maybe 2 more hours at this pace before something breaks." 2 hours. Morrison looked at the tactical display. There were still 11 enemy ships out there, and they were getting angry. The chase continued. For the next hour, the Defiance led the Zephyrian fleet on a deadly game of cat and mouse through the asteroid field. The alien ships were powerful, but they were designed for fighting in open space. Here, surrounded by floating rocks and debris, their size worked against them. The human ship struck again and again. Katie's modified torpedoes found their targets, damaging 2 more Zephyrian vessels. The aliens began to make mistakes, firing too quickly and hitting asteroids instead of their target. But the Defiance was taking damage too. Enemy fire had destroyed their rear shields, and there were hull breaches on 3 decks. Dr. Foster was treating wounded crew members in the medical bay. "Captain," Lisa Grant called out from her communication station. "I'm picking up a transmission from the Zephyrian fleet. They want to talk." Morrison wiped blood from a cut on his forehead. "Put it through." The face that appeared on the main screen was alien but somehow familiar. It had the same look that Morrison had seen on the faces of bullies all his life. Confident, cruel, and used to getting its way. "I am Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Empire," the alien said. "You have fought well, human, but this is over. You cannot win. Surrender now and I will grant you and your crew honorable deaths." Morrison looked around his bridge. His crew was battered and exhausted, but they were still fighting, still refusing to give up. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the UHS Defiance," he said, "and I have a message for you and your empire." He stood, up from his captain's chair, blood still running down his face. "We are human. We don't know how to quit. We don't know how to surrender. And we sure as hell don't know how to break." Morrison leaned forward, staring directly at the alien admiral. "So here's my answer to your offer. Come and take us if you can." He cut the transmission and turned to his crew. "All right, people. They want to fight? Let's give them one they'll never forget." The battle resumed with new fury. The Zephyrians, no longer certain of easy victory, began to fight more carefully, but the Defiance continued to dart through the asteroids, striking and retreating, proving that sometimes the smallest dog in the fight could have the biggest bite. When the Defiance finally scored a direct hit on the crushing blade itself, damaging the flagship's weapon systems, Admiral Kethvar realized something that would change everything. These humans were not like the other species his empire had conquered. They were not going to break. And if one small ship could do this much damage, what would happen if other species saw it and decided to fight back too? For the first time in his career, Admiral Kethvar began to worry about the future of his empire. The news traveled faster than light itself. Across the galaxy, on worlds that had surrendered without firing a shot, people heard the impossible story. A single human ship had fought 12 Zephyrian vessels and survived. Not only survived, but when on the water world of Altair 7, Commander Zigtal folded her feathered wings close to her body as she listened to the intercepted transmission. The Altarians had been among the first to fall to the Zephyrian Empire. Their beautiful cities had been bombed from orbit, their fleets destroyed in a matter of hours. Most of her people had accepted defeat, but not all of them. "Is this true?" asked her second-in-command, a young Altarian named Velsek. "Did one human ship really damage the Zephyrian flagship?" Zigtal studied the data on her screen. Her people were experts at reading energy signatures and battle damage reports. The evidence was clear. "Yes," she said quietly. "It is true. The humans fought, and they hurt the Empire. For 2 years, Zigtal and her small group of fighters had hidden in the deep forests of their moon. They had planned hopeless attacks and desperate raids, but they had never really believed they could win. The Zephyrians seemed too powerful, too many. Now, everything had changed. "Send a message," Ziktal ordered. "Find this human ship. Tell them they are not alone." The Defiance was hiding in a nebula, 3 star systems away from the battlefield. The swirling clouds of gas and dust hid their heat signature from enemy sensors, but Captain Morrison knew they could not stay hidden forever. "Damage report," he said, looking around his battered bridge. Chief Engineer Ron Palmer's voice came through the communication system. He sounded tired. "We took a beating, Captain. Hull breaches on decks 2 and 4. The rear shield generator is completely gone. We're running on backup power for half the ship." Dr. Amy Foster looked up from her medical scanner. 15 crew, members wounded. But everyone will live. We were lucky. Morrison did not feel lucky. They had won the battle, but barely. The Zephyrian fleet had retreated after losing 2 ships and having 4 others damaged, but they would be back. And next time, they would be ready for human tactics. "Sir," Communications Officer Lisa Grant said, "I'm picking up a transmission. It's not human, and it's not Zephyrian." Morrison felt his heart rate increase. "Put it through." The face that appeared on the screen was covered in beautiful golden feathers. The creature had large, dark eyes and a sharp beak. When it spoke, its voice was like music. "Human vessel Defiance," the alien said. "I am Commander Ziktal of the Altarian Resistance. We have heard of your victory against the Empire. We wish to speak with you." Morrison looked at his crew. They had all heard stories about the Altarians. They were supposed to be a peaceful people, interested in art and philosophy. But the creature on the screen had scars on her feathers and fire in her eyes. "Commander Ziktal," Morrison said, "we're honored to hear from you. But I should warn you, talking to us might be dangerous. The Empire is hunting us." Ziktal made a sound that might have been laughter. "Captain Morrison, they have been hunting us for 2 years, but until today we had no hope. You have given us something we thought was lost forever. You have shown us that they can bleed." Over the next few hours, Morrison learned about the Altarian resistance. Ziktal and her fighters had been preparing for what they thought would be their final battle. They had enough weapons and explosives to attack one Zephyrian facility before they were all killed. But now they had a new idea. "There is a supply depot in the Kepler system," Ziktal explained. "It feeds 3 Zephyrian battle groups. If we could destroy it, it would hurt their operations in this entire sector." Navigator Sam Rodriguez studied the tactical data. "It's heavily defended. At least 6 warships plus automated defense systems. My people know the system well," Ziktal said. "We can get your ship close without being detected, but we will need your firepower to break through their defenses." Morrison felt the weight of command pressing down on him. They were asking him to risk his ship and crew on a joint operation with aliens they had just met. It was dangerous, maybe even suicide, but it was also exactly the kind of thing his father would have done. "When do we start?" Morrison asked. The planning took 3 days. The Defiance met the Altarian fighters at a hidden base deep in the forests of their moon. Morrison had never seen anything like it. The trees were huge, some of them over 300 meters tall. The Altarians had built their base in the branches, hidden from orbital sensors. Commander Ziktal was waiting for them when Morrison and a small team beamed down to the surface. She was smaller than he had expected, but there was steel in her voice when she spoke. "Captain Morrison," she said, gripping his hand with her taloned fingers. "Your ship has given us something we thought lost forever. Hope." The Altarian base was impressive. Hidden platforms connected the giant trees, and Morrison could see fighters and small attack craft parked on landing pads made from living wood. There were maybe 50 Altarians in the base, all of them armed and ready to fight. "How long have you been planning this?" Morrison asked as Ziktal led him through the base. "Since the day my world fell," she replied. "We have been watching the supply depot for months. We know their patrol patterns, their shift changes, everything. But we never had the firepower to do real damage." Lieutenant Ben Clark, who had come down with Morrison, was studying the intelligence reports. "This is incredible," he said. "You have details on every ship, every weapon, every defensive system. How did you get all this?" Ziktal pointed to a young Altarian working at a computer station. Velsek used to be a trader. He knows the shipping routes better than anyone, and we have other sources. Not everyone who surrendered stopped fighting in their hearts. That night, Morrison sat with his senior officers around a fire made in a clearing between the trees. The Altarians had provided food that tasted strange but good. Above them, the stars were bright and clear. This could work, Tactical Officer Greg Hayes said, studying the battle plans. Their intelligence is perfect. If we hit fast and hard, we can destroy the depot before reinforcements arrive. But it's still dangerous, Dr. Foster said. If something goes wrong, we'll be trapped in an enemy system with no way out. Everything we do now is dangerous, Morrison replied. The question is whether we want to just survive or whether we want to make a difference. Weapons specialist Katie Burns looked up from cleaning her sidearm. I say we do it. These bird people have been fighting alone for 2 years. It's time they had some backup. The attack was planned for the next morning. The Altarian fighters would create a diversion at the edge of the system, drawing the patrol ships away from the depot. Then the Defiance would strike, using Katie's modified plasma torpedoes to destroy the facility's main reactors. But as Morrison prepared for sleep, he could not shake the feeling that this operation was about more than just destroying a supply depot. Word of their victory against Admiral Kethvar was spreading. He had seen the reports coming in from across the galaxy. Other resistance groups were starting to make contact. The Crystalline Collective on Vega Prime had emerged from their underground cities. The aquatic deep swimmers of Tau Ceti were sabotaging underwater installations. Even some human colonies that had surrendered were beginning to resist their occupiers. The flame of rebellion was spreading, and the Defiance had lit the match. The next morning came quickly. Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship as they prepared to leave the nebula. Through the main screen, he could see the Altarian fighters forming up beside them, small fast ships that looked more like birds than spacecraft. All stations report ready, Greg Hayes said. Altarian fighters are in position, Lisa Grant added. Morrison took a deep breath. When they had started this journey, they had been running and hiding. Now they were going on the attack. It felt good to be taking the fight to the enemy instead of just trying to survive. All right, people, Morrison said. Let's go show the galaxy that the age of easy conquests is over. The combined fleet jumped to hyperspace, heading for their target. Behind them, the forest moon of Altair 7 seemed peaceful and quiet. But appearances could be deceiving. The resistance had been born and it was growing stronger every day. The attack on the Kepler supply depot was perfect. The Defiance and the Altarian fighters hit fast and hard, destroying the massive facility in less than 30 minutes. The explosion could be seen from 3 star systems away, a bright flash that announced to the galaxy that the resistance was real. Captain Morrison watched the debris field through his main screen as they jumped back to hyperspace. The depot had been huge, big enough to supply dozens of Zephyrian ships. Now it was nothing but twisted metal and burning gas. Mission accomplished, weapons specialist Katie Burns said with satisfaction. Her modified plasma torpedoes had worked perfectly, punching through the depot's shields like they were made of paper. But Morrison knew this was just the beginning. The real test would come when the Zephyrian Empire responded to their attack. They did not have to wait long. On the throne world of Zephyr Prime, Emperor Vashkol sat in his crystal palace and listened to the reports with growing anger. First, a human ship had damaged his fleet. Now that same ship had destroyed one of his most important supply bases. How many rebel groups are active now? He asked his intelligence commander. 17 different cells across 12 star systems, my lord. The humans seem to have inspired every defeated species in the galaxy. Emperor Vashkol was old, even by Zephyrian standards. He had built his empire through fear and overwhelming force. No one had ever successfully resisted his armies for more than a few days. The idea that a single human ship could inspire galaxy-wide rebellion was impossible to accept. Send Dreadlord Nextar, the Emperor ordered. Give him 50 ships and orders to end this rebellion completely. I want that human vessel destroyed and I want its destruction broadcast to every world in the galaxy. Dreadlord Nextar was the most feared commander in the Zephyrian fleet. He had destroyed entire civilizations without losing a single ship. His black dreadnought, the final word, was twice the size of Admiral Kethvar's flagship. When Nextar received his orders, he smiled. It had been too long since he had faced a real challenge. The Defiance was taking on supplies at a hidden asteroid base when the news reached them. Lieutenant Ben Clark had been monitoring Zephyrian communications, and his face was pale when he brought the report to Captain Morrison. "Sir," Ben said quietly, "the Empire has sent their best hunter after us. Dreadlord Nextar is coming with 50 ships." Morrison felt cold settle in his stomach. Everyone in the galaxy had heard of Nextar. The Dreadlord had never been defeated, never even been challenged. "How long do we have, Kiadi?" Morrison asked. "Maybe a week before he reaches this sector. But sir, there's something else. Our Altarian allies were discovered. The Empire found their..." Morrison closed his eyes. He had been afraid this would happen. "Casualties? Commander Ziegtal and most of her fighters are dead. They held off a Zephyrian attack force for 6 hours before the base was overrun. But before she died, Ziegtal sent us a message." Ben activated a small recording device. The voice that came out was weak and full of static, but it was definitely Ziegtal. "Captain Morrison," she said, "the Empire has found us, but we do not regret our choice to fight. You showed us that courage is contagious. The flame spreads. Do not let it die." The recording ended, and the bridge was quiet for a long moment. "She was a good warrior," Morrison said finally. "We won't let her sacrifice be wasted." But privately, Morrison was worried. The Defiance was damaged from their recent battles, and they were running low on supplies. Half his crew was exhausted, and Dr. Foster was still treating wounded from their last fight. Chief Engineer Ron Palmer appeared on the bridge, his hands covered in grease as usual. "Captain, I've got good news and bad news." "Give me the bad news." "First, the ship is falling apart. We're held together by spare parts and prayer. One more big battle might finish us." Morrison sighed. "And the good news?" Ron grinned. "I've been studying the weapons we captured from the depot. I think I can make our plasma torpedoes even more powerful. If we can hit their ships in the right places, we might be able to do serious damage even to Nextar's dreadnought." Over the next few days, reports continued to flow in from across the galaxy. The rebellion was growing faster than anyone had expected. On Vega Prime, the Crystalline Collective had seized control of 3 major cities. The deep swimmers of Tau Ceti had destroyed an entire Zephyrian submarine fleet. Even more surprising, some human colonies were joining the fight. The mining worlds of the Outer Rim had declared independence and were building their own defense fleets. The agricultural colonies of the inner systems were refusing to send food to Zephyrian forces. "It's working," Communications Officer Lisa Grant said as she read the latest reports. "The whole galaxy is rising up." But Navigator Sam Rodriguez was studying the tactical displays with concern. "Jake," he said privately to Morrison, "Nextar isn't just hunting us. He's hunting every rebel group in this sector, and he's winning." Sam was right. The Dreadlord's fleet was moving systematically through rebel-held systems, crushing resistance wherever they found it. The crystal cities of Vega Prime had been bombed from orbit. The deep swimmer fleets had been destroyed. One by one, the rebellion was being stamped out. "We can't keep running," Morrison said to his senior officers during their daily meeting. "Every day we hide, more rebels die. Nextar is using us as bait to draw out other resistance groups." "What are you suggesting?" Dr. Foster asked. Morrison looked around the table at his friends and crewmates. They had been through so much together. Katie with her endless modifications to their weapons, Greg with his tactical genius, Sam with his impossible flying skills, Ron with his ability to keep the ship running on nothing but determination. "I'm suggesting we stop running and start hunting," Morrison said. "We make Nextar come to us on our terms." The plan was dangerous, maybe even suicidal, but it was also the only way to stop the slaughter of rebel groups across the galaxy. They would broadcast their location to the entire Zephyrian fleet. Not hide, not run, but challenge Nextar to single combat. Ship against ship, crew against crew. That's crazy, Greg said when Morrison explained the plan. Nextar has 50 ships. We have one. But we'll choose the battlefield, Morrison replied, and we won't be facing all 50 ships at once. The location Morrison had chosen was the ruins of the Antares shipyards, where humanity had once built its greatest vessels. The massive construction platforms were still there, floating in space like the bones of dead giants. It was a graveyard, but it was also a maze. The twisted metal and broken machinery would provide cover and limit the number of ships that could attack them at once. We broadcast a challenge to Nextar, Morrison explained. Make it personal. Tell the entire galaxy that we're not afraid of his reputation. And then what? Katie asked. Morrison smiled grimly. Then we prove that humans don't know how to quit. The message was sent on all frequencies, designed to reach every corner of the galaxy. Morrison recorded it himself, standing on his damaged bridge with his battered crew behind him. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the UHS Defiance calling. Dreadlord Nextar of the Zephyrian Empire. You want to end the rebellion? You want to destroy the ship that started it all? Then come and face us. We'll be waiting at the Antares shipyards. Come alone. Or bring your entire fleet. It doesn't matter. We are the Defiance. We don't surrender. We don't break. And we're done running. The message was broadcast across the galaxy. On 1,000 worlds, beings who had thought the rebellion was finished heard the defiant words of a human captain challenging the Empire's greatest warrior. On his flagship, Dreadlord Nextar received the message and laughed. The human was either very brave or very stupid. Either way, he would soon be very dead. But as Nextar prepared his fleet for the final hunt, he did not know that other ships were already moving toward Antares. The rebellion was not as dead as he thought, and sometimes the smallest spark could light the biggest fire. The ruins of the Antares shipyards floated in space like the skeleton of a giant metal whale. Once, this had been humanity's greatest construction facility, where massive starships were built to explore the galaxy. Now it was a graveyard of twisted metal and broken dreams. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiance looking at the wreckage around them. His ship was hidden among the old construction platforms, waiting for Dreadlord Nextar to arrive. Sir, Communications Officer Lisa Grant said quietly. I'm detecting ships approaching. Lots of them. Morrison nodded. He had expected this. How many? 53 vessels, all Zephyrian design. The flagship is twice the size of anything we've seen before. Through the main screen, Morrison could see lights moving in the distance. The Zephyrian fleet was spreading out, surrounding the shipyard ruins. They looked like a school of predatory fish circling their prey. Captain, Tactical Officer Greg Hayes said. There's something else. I'm detecting other ships approaching. From different directions, they're not Zephyrian. Morrison felt his heart skip a beat. What kind of ships? Mixed fleet, sir. I see Altarian fighters, crystalline vessels, human ships from the outer colonies. It looks like every rebel group in this sector is coming here. Morrison stared at the tactical display in amazement. Dozens of ships were converging on Antares from all directions. Old cargo vessels converted into fighters. Mining ships fitted with weapons. Even some official military vessels from worlds that had supposedly surrendered. They heard our message, Navigator Sam Rodriguez said with wonder in his voice. They're all coming to fight. The largest ship in the approaching rebel fleet was an old human cruiser, the Liberty Bell. It had been mothballed for 20 years, but someone had brought it back to life. The voice that came through the communication system was familiar. Defiance. This is Admiral Parker commanding the Free Fleet. We're here to back you up. Morrison could hardly believe it. Admiral Parker was the same officer who had ordered all human ships to surrender just weeks ago. Admiral, I thought you had given up. Parker's laugh came through the speakers. I did give up, Captain. But then I heard about a small frigate that refused to break. You reminded me what it means to be human, what it means to fight for something bigger than yourself. All around the Antares shipyards, ships continued to arrive. The rebel fleet was a mixture of every species the Zephyrian Empire had conquered. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they were here. On his flagship, the Final Word, Dreadlord Nextar watched the rebel ships gather with cold amusement. "How many vessels are we facing?" he asked his second-in-command. "Approximately 80 ships, my lord. But most of them are civilian vessels with minimal weapons. They pose no real threat." Nextar nodded. "Then we will destroy them all at once. It will send a message to the entire galaxy. No one can stand against the Empire." But as Nextar prepared to give the order to attack, he noticed something strange. The rebel ships were not trying to run. They were not begging for mercy. They were forming battle lines, preparing to fight. "Interesting," Nextar murmured. "They actually intend to resist." The battle began at dawn, ship time. The Zephyrian fleet opened fire first, their massive energy weapons lighting up the darkness of space. But the rebels were ready. The Defiance led the charge, diving between the twisted metal structures of the old shipyard. Captain Morrison had grown up flying through asteroid fields, and he used every trick he knew to avoid the enemy fire. "Katie," Morrison shouted over the noise of explosions. "Target their flagship." Weapons specialist Katie Burns had been working for days to modify their plasma torpedoes. Now she fired everything they had at the Final Word. The missiles streaked across space, striking the massive dreadnought's shields. To everyone's surprise, the shields flickered and failed. Chief Engineer Ron Palmer's modifications had worked. The plasma torpedoes punched through the enemy defenses and exploded against the hull. The Final Word shuddered under the impact, but it was far from finished. Dreadlord Nextar's ship was the most powerful vessel in the Zephyrian fleet. It would take more than a few torpedoes to bring it down. All around them, the battle raged. The rebel fleet fought with desperate courage, but they were taking heavy losses. Old cargo ships exploded under enemy fire. Mining vessels tried to ram Zephyrian cruisers, sacrificing themselves to damage the larger ships. "Sir," Dr. Amy Foster called from her station, "we're taking casualties all over the ship. Medical bay is full." Morrison knew they were running out of time. The Defiance had taken severe damage, and most of the rebel fleet was being destroyed. But they had accomplished something important. They had proven that the Empire could be hurt. "Ron," Morrison called down to engineering. "How long until the reactor overloads?" Ron Palmer's voice came back, strained with effort. "Maybe 10 minutes, Captain. The containment field is failing fast." Morrison made his decision. They could not win this battle, but they could make sure their sacrifice counted for something. "All hands, this is the captain," Morrison announced over the ship-wide communication system. "Prepare for ramming speed. We're going to take out their flagship." The bridge crew looked at their captain with understanding. They had known this moment would come eventually. They were going to die, but they would die fighting. "It's been an honor serving with you all," Morrison said quietly. Navigator Sam Rodriguez smiled grimly as he plotted their final course. "See you on the other side, Jake." The Defiance turned toward the Final Word, its engines pushing the damaged ship to maximum speed. Behind them, the few remaining rebel ships followed, ready to make their own final stands. Dreadlord Nextar watched the human ship approach and felt something he had never experienced before: respect. These humans were about to die, but they were not afraid. They were charging directly at his flagship, ready to sacrifice themselves for their cause. "All weapons, target that frigate," Nextar ordered. "Destroy it before it reaches us." The Final Word's guns opened fire, but the Defiance kept coming. The human ship took hit after hit, pieces of hull flying off into space. But it did not stop. When the Defiance finally struck the Zephyrian flagship, the explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. The human frigate's overloading reactor detonated on impact, tearing a massive hole in the Final Word's hull. Dreadlord Nextar died in the blast along with most of his command crew. The most feared warrior in the Zephyrian Empire was gone, destroyed by a ship that refused to surrender. But more importantly, the battle was being broadcast across the galaxy. Every world that had surrendered to the Empire saw the small human ship's final charge. They saw ordinary beings from dozens of species fighting back against their oppressors. The effect was immediate and devastating for the Zephyrian Empire. Within hours of the battle, Rebellions broke out on 100 worlds. The sight of the defiances, sacrifice had inspired something that the Empire could not fight: hope. Within 6 months, the Zephyrian Empire collapsed completely. World after world threw off their occupiers, remembering the lesson of the small human ship that had refused to break. The 43 souls who had served aboard the Defiance were gone, but their legacy lived on, in the freedom of countless worlds, in the knowledge that even the smallest action could change the course of history. A memorial was erected in Earth orbit, bearing the names of every crew member who had died aboard the Defiance. But the inscription below was what people remembered most. They stood when others knelt. They fought when others fled. They died so that others might live free. And below that, the words that had started it all: "We are the Defiance. We do not surrender. We do not break." The galaxy was free, and it would remember forever the price of that freedom.